Did the bell ring? The bell rang. I guess that means it's time to start. Welcome back for week number 10 of Nourishing Our Roots. Everybody doing okay today? Good. Our topic this week is the church, which probably is nothing new, but we'll take a look at it. Before we get started, Brother David's going to lead us in our opening prayer. Amen. Thank you. This week is not going to be quite so information dense as some of the previous ones, so more discussion is welcome. We are at the church. If we have a minute toward the end, I would like to ask for a little feedback on what's up there for the next 2 weeks, attitudes and actions. The thought being, looking at how we develop, how a Christian grows, and attitudes change as we mature. And then the following week, to follow that same pathway, but how our actions change. What are the results of those attitudes? How are those attitudes expressed in our behaviors? So if you want to put that on the back burner for a little bit to maybe give some feedback, if we have a minute at the end, I would appreciate that. It was not part of the original schedule. I thought, let's change it up a little bit. But if it sounds like a terrible idea, I'll go back to something else. Our topic this week, the church. You've probably heard this word and seen it many times. Ecclesia is the Greek word that is used for, which is translated as the church. It is literally the called out. It is most often 109 times out of 114 times in the New Testament there, translated as church or churches. It comes from the preposition ek, which is of or out, and klesis, to call or a calling. It's not special to the church, as we'll see in a little bit. It's used in other ways, but it means a gathering, an assembly. In the Septuagint, that Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures, it was used to translate this word that was for gathering. And it would refer to the whole nation or an assembly of the whole nation. The word that it was translated, edah, which appears a whole bunch of times, 126 times as congregation. But again, it's not specific to that, it's just the word that is used. It's interesting, the last one that's written up there, swarm, that is the one that appears in Judges, where a swarm of bees had made their hive inside the body of the lion. I was just wondering when I saw that, does this suggest an organized mob, as it were, as opposed to just disorganized? Because bees are very organized. A unit, perhaps. I don't have any real reason to make that connection. But it usually referred to the congregation of Israel, the whole of Israel. Things like they would come together on the feast days, or they came together in Judges, they came together to punish the tribe of Benjamin. Going back to ecclesia, it's used in a couple of different ways. In Acts 7:38, it is used of the nation of Israel. In Acts 19:32, it's the mob in Ephesus, where they all came out and they're on the verge of having a riot until the town clerk came out and kind of quieted them down and said, look, we can't do this. If you've got an argument, the courts are open, bring the charges. Otherwise, just go home. It has two applications, really, in the New Testament in terms of applying to Christians. The first one is to the whole company, the whole body of the redeemed throughout the world and throughout time is the church. The second one we have in the singular to a particular group, like you would have the congregation or the church in Cary, that specific group here, or in the plural to churches within a district, and there are several examples of that. The churches of Galatia, the churches of Asia, the churches of Macedonia, and again, the churches of Galatia and Judea. Any comments? This is all just the raw information. Now, what is the church? There are a few scriptures where it specifically equates the church to something. For example, here in 1 Corinthians 1:2, to the church of God which is at Corinth, to those who have been sanctified in Christ Jesus, saints by calling. So you have the church in a parallel construction with those who've been sanctified, saints by calling. So we're special. In Colossians 1:18, he is also head of the body, the church. And that same thing, that same image or likeness, that same figure is used in Colossians 1:24. Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I do my share on behalf of his body, which is the church. So we have the very clear connection between these things. Does anybody else have anything to say? Bill.
When people ask me what church do I go to, I think they're using like a generic term, but when I respond to it, I always say, I go to the church that Christ church, what he bought with his blood. There's a distinction as to what church one goes to. People say, well, not the
Bill's comment was that people use the word church, generically, meaning a particular building or group of people, but it could meaning any group that meets together. And they ask, what church do you go to? And it is pointing that we need to say we're part of the church that Jesus bought with his blood, not some man-made group. Is that justified? Yes.
The previous slide had the scripture that talks about according to his calling, and I was actually in a study Thursday with someone who referred that as if God has only selected a few, and there are denominations that preach that. Fortunately, my brother who's with us said, "How does God call us? All are called." But we have to understand that's not a selective, that he doesn't cast aside others.
Robert's comment was, there are those, pointing to the saints by calling, there are those who say that this is a special thing, you're picked out individually, but we are called by the gospel. We are all called by the gospel. We're going to come back to this stuff in more detail. Another one, 1 Timothy 3:15. I write so that you will know how one ought to conduct himself in the household of God, which is the church. Which is the church of the living God, the pillar and support of the truth. So we are God's household. I don't remember exactly where it is, but it says we were being built together, built up into a dwelling place for God in the Spirit, or in spirit, depending on which translation you're reading. Jesus said that they would come and make their home with us, abide in us, with us. That's a pretty special place. Yes.
My brother, I asked him, "Are you going to church today?" He always said, "I am the church." Explain that to me.
And the question is?
He said, "I am the church." Just he. It's the church. Aren't you supposed to gather together?
Your brother says, I am the church.
Every Sunday I ask him the same thing.
She asks her brother, are you going to church today? He says, I am the church. Well, that's not quite right. We'll get into this in more detail in a little bit.
We see nothing in the scriptures that shows that an individual makes up the body. It's a group of individuals that make up the body of the church. So I guess if you're the only person that's a Christian in your town, you might be the church. But if there's a group that you can meet with, then the example, the inference from the scripture would be that you should be meeting with that group.
The comment was, if you're the only person in the area that is a Christian, yeah, you could say, I'm the church. But if there are others, you should be together because the body has many members.
When it comes to talking about the church, the most we can be is a part of or a member of the body.
And we're going to look at that in some detail as we're coming up.
I like the phrase that Larry used in one of his sermons that I never thought about before. And we all
really not going to church. We're coming to worship. We gather together, make up the church. But it's a phrase that we use so much that that's how the world looks at where you go to church this morning. I'm really coming to worship. I'm not coming to church because wherever we as a group make up the church all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm coming to worship.
Eddie's comment.
I wish I could get in that habit of saying that all, but I'm going to worship, not going to church.
Eddie's comment is that we come to worship, not go to church. And that phrase is common all around us. We use it. It's confusing to people, really.
Rather than saying, I'm going to church, most correctly we should say, I'm going to such and such church building. Or, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to the building, not the church. I'm going to meet the church at the building, part of the church at the building.
How about we're going to assemble? Yes, we're going to worship. We're going to assemble as the body for worship.
Again, if they want to get in detail, then you can explain. Give you an open.
Let's move on here. I did invite all kinds of comments, but we need to keep going. I think this is the last one of these, but you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of angels, to the general assembly of the church, of the church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. Now, exactly where you put a comma or don't put a comma in there can change things. There are some translations that have of the firstborn, comma, who are enrolled in heaven. And exactly how you understand what the firstborn is referring to, if you recall in the law, the firstborn were God's. Whether it was human or animal or anything, the firstborn belonged to God. I think there's a parallel there of we share in the rights and privileges of the firstborn. Now, Jesus is the capital letter firstborn. But because of our relationship to him, we share in the inheritance with him. We share in the privilege of the firstborn. I think that is the sense in which this is being used there.
Yeah, it's almost like a figure of speech. You're not literally a firstborn, but you are, as you comment, in the Old Testament, the firstborn was sanctified, belonged to God as a sacrifice, and they had to be bought back if it was human. You had to be redeemed. So I think you're not literally firstborn, it's just that sense of you are now God's.
I think everyone could hear you. If everyone spoke like Bill, I wouldn't have to repeat all this. I know, but yeah. Any further comments on that one? Okay, and now's where the discussion really should pick up. The body. That figure is used over and over again. We are the body of Christ. The church is his body. What does that mean functionally?
One way to consider it is that it is an organism
So we have the body as an organism that has a whole bunch of different parts and pieces, but they all work as a unit. What does it mean if the body is sick? Well, following up on Bob's thing, you've got this organism. How does the organism know what to do? How are the various pieces and parts coordinated? What's the controller?
The head.
The head. Now, if the body is sick, can it do what the head says? It could be paralyzed. It could be weakened. There are all kinds of illnesses. There are all kinds of problems. Dan?
It could be malnutrition. The body could need nutrition or input, or it may need to be edified, or who knows what.
It could be lacking food. It could be lacking the energy. Robert?
The body, as you mentioned, or as was mentioned, is an organism that depends upon each and every part. Anyone who might have slammed their pinky fingernail in a car door and gone into shock knows full well that the weakest member is a part of the entire body, and the entire body feels the pain of the one. And by that same token, Christ's body is a single body that supports each and every member.
So the body is united in a sense, so that if the finger gets slammed in the door, the whole body reacts to it. It should anyway, unless it's numb, which would be one kind of problem. Irene?
You probably already covered this, and I missed a few, that to be in the body, you need to be baptized. You have to be baptized into the body. You don't just come and you're in the body.
Irene made the point that to be in the body, we must be baptized into it, and I think we're supposed to hit that somewhere in here. If the body's, oh, go ahead.
The body, we still want to look at it from a religious standpoint too. So once a member, regardless of where he is, where he lie in the body, but he bring false teaching into the body, and that had to be dealt with. It got to be spiritually clean. It had to be done properly in order to fix the body, because he's still that person or that somebody is still part of the body. So he needs to be, he has got to be cleansed, he got to be taught. You know, that's what was going on with Paul writing to the churches, is people keep going away from it. They had to reteach them and bring them back into the body, cleanse the body. That's how I see it.
The comment was that there may be members of the body who are in the body but are bringing in things like false teaching, and that needs to be dealt with. Call it an infection, if you will. But it needs to be handled lest that infection spread. The figure of the body is extremely rich in helping us understand how all these parts work together. More to come on that. So if the body's healthy, it can do what it's supposed to do. It will be executing the commands or the directives coming from the head. Everything works well together. And we already talked about the sick part. Now, 1 Corinthians 12, we're going to spend some time here because this has this emphasis on the body. And we'll look at this just a couple verses at a time here. So starting at verses 12 and 13, somebody like to read that for us?
For even as the body is one, yet has many members, all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether Jew or Greek, whether slave or free, and we are all made to drink of one Spirit.
So the body is one. And as Irene pointed out, we become part of the body by baptism. Okay, we're not going to quibble over this.
There's some congregations that teach you can be saved, but to be a member of their organization, you have to be baptized. I didn't want to believe that at first.
Okay, Irene said that there's some congregations, are you saying of the Lord's church? Or no, just churches in general that say, okay, you're saved, but if you want to be part of our, quote, church, you have to be baptized with us. Well, let's leave that one alone. There are many teachings on this, and let's just stick with what the Bible says. In baptism, we made a choice. I could express that choice as I choose to quit being just myself and choose to be part of Christ. Because when we become part of the body, we are not alone anymore. We are not a separate thing. We are part of this organism, this assembly. I'm not just me. Now, did I understand that? Did I understand the full implications of that the day I was baptized? Probably not. Would you say that you really understand the full implications of that now? Or are you still growing and your understanding increasing? We're growing. We should be growing. Dan.
Hopefully, we're in a state of continuous improving.
We should be growing, yes. It says all made to drink of one spirit. Some translations say all made to drink, I think, into one spirit. Spirit here is capitalized, but that is an artifact of the translations. And I think most of them do capitalize it. But it is not into the Spirit, into one Spirit. In that sense, Spirit can be a quality rather than an identity. We are to have the mind of Christ. We are to be of one spirit, one mind, one heart.
You know, whether the word spirit is capitalized is almost another study because there might be a thought trend where some people say, well, when the word spirit is capitalized, it's talking about that one-third part of the Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost.
Well, to answer that, there were no capitals in the original Greek. So whether something is capitalized here in the English translations is essentially a matter of interpretation. So you could study how the interpreters or the translators considered it, but that's adding a layer. There's no point. Next couple of verses. Can someone read that one for us? 14 through 17.
The body is not one member but many. If the foot says, because I am not a hand, I am not part of the body, it is not for this reason the less a part of the body. And if the ear says, because I am not an eye, I am not a part of the body, it is not for this reason any the less a part of the body.
The wording is a little bit awkward. In looking at this, I don't know if this is really what Paul was getting at. I think it's close. There's no room for hissy fits and jealousy. Well, I'm not one of the principal players. I'm not an elder. I'm not a deacon, so I don't want any part of this. I'm not the preacher. I'm not the quarterback, so I don't want to be on the team. I'm not the pitcher, so I don't want to be part. This kind of thing of saying, I'm not a something, rather than being what you are, there's no room for that because we're all part. We all belong to the body. We all have function. And it's all needed. These various parts, how does one work without all the others? Dan?
Maybe what Paul's trying to teach us here is that we need to accept ourselves for what we are. I mean, without the neck, the head would fall off and roll along the floor.
Good illustration. Bob?
What we may not quite realize in this phrase is that the seemingly unimportant part may do something that is of the most importance. For example, Paul on the road to Damascus, God taught him the right life and everything else. And yet he still had to go to some place to Damascus, and he was taught there what he needed to know. Well, we know a name of somebody who taught him, but we don't really know anything else about them. That seemingly minor important event, to some extent, that is, oh, I met a person and I told him what I knew about Jesus. Turns out that it was one of the most important transmissions of information that ever took place in the Bible by someone we know nothing about.
Bob's comment, if I can boil that down, is the most insignificant part of the body may have a critical function. And we may not know exactly what that's going to be or how it's going to work, but it's there and it's needed. Jim?
We need to always remember the context in which the scriptures are written. And in this passage, Paul has been talking about spiritual gifts. The church of Corinth had had a problem because someone said, my spiritual gift is better than yours. And they keep, they were comparing those gifts. And of course, in chapter 13, he's going to go and say, the time for spiritual gifts is going to go away. And that doesn't
Jim's comment was that the context of this passage is that Paul was talking about the spiritual gifts and that the people in Corinth were having arguments or disagreements, mine's better than yours kind of thing. But this is all setting the stage for chapter 13, where the gifts are gone and love is what remains. Can we move on?
Well, along with what Jim's saying, we've seen evidences of people in congregations, let's say the apostolic denomination, where people claim to have the gift of speaking in tongues, and they thought that, this is a great gift, kind of like you, I'm more important than you, and yet it's really not true.
Next one. Could someone read this for us?
If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But now God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body, just as he has desired.
So as several have already alluded to, we've got many parts, and although one may seem insignificant, it's important. We can't all be the same thing. If everything was an eye, how would it get around? Adam?
There's no place for comparison on which works are better than others, because all of them are effective in some way or another. And as it says, God has placed them where they need to be. It's about the heart and your good intentions that matter.
Adam's comment, there's no place for comparison of one work versus another because they're all important. I put an asterisk by the word placed there. That is the verb etheta. And in a commentary I was reading on this passage, they noted that this same verb, although it shows a little different form there, is used in John 15:16, where Jesus said to the disciples, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you would go and bear fruit." This placement, we are placed in the body according to or as he desired. So, does this, it kind of sounds like what many people say, God's special reason for me. What's my purpose? What's my special work? I don't know if it really goes to that, because we're all told the same thing. We all have the whole gospel. We all have the instructions of how a Christian is to live. But he's put us here. I mean, there's that sense of he has put us here. We shouldn't feel insignificant or unworthy or whatever it is. Have confidence in him. Robert.
Another word that we can think of there is join. In Ephesians 4, Paul writes, "Speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." I think many times we think, human body,
I'm hesitating. I'm not quite sure how to summarize that.
When I think of this, the coach comes out of me, and, you know, when I'm putting together a team, a football team, an offense, I look at the kids that have come out. I decide from their skills who's playing quarterback, who's going to be a guard, who's going to be a tackle, who's an end. Not that any one of them is any more important than the other. So it takes that 11 on the offense, the 11 on the defense to function as a team, as one, to get the job done. And that's how I see God. He's putting us where he needs us to fit in his body to get the job done, which is to spread the gospel.
Eddie used the example of a football team and the coach decides who plays where and does what. And that God, in a sense, does the same thing with us. Dottie.
Real quick, when in verse 17 says, if the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? The church is supposed to be diverse. We need to be diverse. We can't all be the same thing. We can't all have the same bent. There's going to be people that you're going to reach that I will not be able to talk to about Christ, right? But they'll talk to you, right? Or they'll talk to me, or they'll talk to Lily, they'll talk to Sister Cannon, they'll talk to Snova. We have to be different because Christ created us diverse, right? So the whole world can hear the gospel. So we don't have to be like everyone else. And that's why the apostles, the disciples, they were not the same type of people. They all had different bents, right? Because they all reached different people. And that's the church. We need to have those personalities. We need to have that diversity because we want the body to grow.
Dottie's main point in there is that we are diverse. We were made that way, and we can function that way because there are a lot of things to be done, and different ones can do different things. Different ones will reach different ones. We are almost out of time. Bill?
And we change roles when the situation changes.
It's a good point. We change roles when the situation changes. We don't have to stay in one thing. We can develop other skills. We can do other things. Might not be as good at it as somebody else might be, but we can still do it. 19 through 21, this has been pretty much said already. If they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members, but one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. We are diverse. We have many functions, but the functions all work together as one. And now you are Christ's body, and individually members of it. Suzanne.
I think about this sometimes during communion, when Christ sacrificed his body and the connection between my commitment to his body as the church and whether I'm fulfilling my sacrificial role like he did.
Comment about in communion, we share in the body. Are we doing our part? Are we there? We are officially out of time. If anybody has a comment about that suggestion of attitudes and then actions, I would love to hear your comments, but they're starting to come in. So thank you for your attention and your participation.